Good morning and welcome to Sewing Street. I'm John Cole Morgan and I am so excited to have you with me this morning. It is my fabulous block of the week, which I'm really excited about. And the block we're doing is that one there. I'm very excited. Half square triangle realness. And I tell you now, the best thing you're going to have in your arsenal this morning is, well, it's coming, because we forgot to put it out, is my rotating cutting mat. Love it. Thank you very much for that. As if by magic. So if you haven't got a rotating cutting mat, make sure you watch the next hour. This is the most fabulous product. You're definitely going to need that in this hour. So let me show you what we're doing. As you know, our block of the week is what we're doing is because we're all stuck at home. We wanted to make sure that we had something that we can all do together. I think people always react well when they've got a project that they're doing with people, something with a common goal and something that you're doing together. And you can then share your experiences in it, ask questions. And I love seeing your finished blocks on our social media platforms as well. So please make sure when you make a block, pop it up online, and you can join us at any time. You may be joining us today for the first time and not know what the block of the week is. We're doing week 5. We've already made 5 blocks. And if you've missed a show, don't worry. Pop onto YouTube, our Sewing Street channel TV channel on there. We'll be able to have every single one of our blocks of the week. We pull it out by the full hour of our block of the week. We pull out every week, so you'll be able to see exactly what it is that we're doing, how we make the block, my top tips with regards to quarter inch, not quarter inch. Last week you'll be able to see I did that very good tutorial on being able to show you what a quarter inch is and what a scant quarter inch is and how important the two are together, which is very important for today's class. So yeah, be able to keep in touch with us on social media. You'll be able to catch up with what we've done. And we're now going to show you the blocks that we're doing. We've got 3 different colorways. This is our fabulous Brights colorway here, which is so lovely. And this is the one I'm going to do the demo with today. We've got our wonderful blue colorway over here as well. And I'll show you these later when I've done the demo. And we've got our lovely, ever so popular vintage colorway over here. This one has been our top seller so far, and you can tell why. It's just the most gorgeous colorway on that. So the block that we're doing today, let me show you first of all what we're going to get as your kit. So whichever colorway you order this in, you're going to get the same one. So you're going to get the pattern, and if you order the blue colorway, this is what you're going to end up getting on that. You're going to get the fabric panel and the pattern. The pattern is very concise and it shows you exactly how to do it. And if you've missed anything on the pattern, don't worry, you can catch us on YouTube and be able to catch up on everything that we've done on that. So this is the fabric panel you're getting for the blue. You can tell 55 inches wide, you are going to have so much fabric left over, and it's great. Really good. Only thing to be aware of on each of these fabrics, it doesn't matter whether you're buying your Brights colorway, blue colorway, or vintage colorway, it does not matter. They are numbered the same way. But people who've done this before, pay attention. We have got a different way that this has happened this week. Usually we go fabric 1, 3, and 2. Not this week. Pay attention. We've gone fabric 1. So you can see there's fabric 1. And then fabric 2, fabric 3, and fabric 4. Because this week we need more of fabric 2 than we do of fabric 3. So in previous weeks, number 3 has been here and number 2's been down here. But not this week. Number 3 is down here and number 2's there. So if you're used to doing these or you're doing them block on block, that's where there's a slight difference on it. So don't worry. Just make sure that you keep cutting off the fabric 1, 2, and 3 and 4 labels and keep sticking them to your instructions, and make sure you follow that through the whole pattern, because it'll make your life a lot easier without having to unpick things. Nobody likes that. So that's our fabulous blue colorway. We've got our wonderful Brights colorway as well. I shall do Brights next because I'm going to demo in the Brights. Our vintage colorway is so special. Again, you're going to get this wonderful set of instructions. You're going to get this vintage pattern, vintage colorway fabric panel as well. And let me show you what the vintage one looks like. And again, you get so much fabric. This is such a lovely colorway, it really is. Again, the fabrics have been moved around this week, so you're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4 rather than 1, 3, 2, and 4. So just bear that in mind while you're cutting everything out. So that's our vintage colorway. And finally, we've got our Brights colorway. And no matter which colorway you order, you're going to get the same fabric panel just with the colorway that you've ordered and the set of instructions for $11.99. Whoops, I got that upside down. And there we go. So this is the one I'm going to demo with you, so I'm not going to fold that back up. And let me show you the block that we're making this week. So, to keep it in the same order that we're doing, we've got our blue colourway there. Now don't get scared, I know it's half square triangles, but I promise they're easier than you think they are. Then we've got our vintage colourway there. And finally we've got our brights colourway. Check I've got that the right way around. Now if anybody wants to know where this goes on the quilt, the way I've suggested it goes is just there. Hopefully you can see that through my arm. So there you go, that's where the block is going to fit into the quilt. And that's the same position all the way around on all the quilts, no matter which colourway you go. That's the way it's going to look. So how are we making this, I hear you all asking. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out our colours. Now normally I use a pair of scissors for this, but I'm going to change it up this week and I'm going to show you how to do it with a rotary cutter. A little bit quicker. So the very first thing I do, because the selvage has my name on it, and it's a very, very proud moment for me to be able to have my name on a selvage. I'm going to pull that to one side. I separate my colours. I like having my fabric separated. This is what works for me. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the way you want to do it. It's just what works for me. So I'm separating fabrics 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as I've said before, I went a bit funny there. Now the great thing is when you have cut this incorrectly like I just did, you can see I veered off at the end. You've got tons of fabric, so don't worry, you're not going to miss out. You've got more than enough to make the block. So then I'm going to take off my fabric number 1, my label for fabric number 1, and I keep that. And I'm going to cut off fabric number 2 as well. And fabric number 3. I'm just cleaning these edges up to go from there. Right. Now, on the edge here, you can see I've got a tiny little slither of yellow on the edge there. Please don't worry. If you have that in your fabric, it is absolutely not a problem in the slightest, because all of that will be hidden in your 1/4 inch seam. So as long as whatever excess you've got of the fabric before it, or the white, or whatever way you've done it, it doesn't matter. As long as it's less than 1/4 inch, you will be absolutely fine. It won't even show, nobody's going to see it at all, as long as it's less than 1/4 inch. If you've gone more than 1/4 inch, then we just recut, and that's why we're giving you more fabric in case there's an odd little mistake along the way. So these are such amazingly long pieces here, so I'm just going to do that to get that off. Right. Because I like having my fabric pieces separate for this, to be able to then, I find it easier cutting them that way. If you don't have to cut these apart at all. You do what's best for you. There we go. So now I've gone past the fabric 3 line. So again, I'm just going to trim off where it says fabric 4, and I'm trimming that at the join between 3 and 4 as well. So my fabric 3, for the want of a better word, is now free. And then I'm just going to carry this on along the way. Because what I love about our social media platforms is any questions that you have, you've been able to ask online. So if I've seen any questions through the week that I think are really good, or that I need to just make it a bit easier for everybody to see how they do it. Somebody asked, how do you actually cut these up with a rotary cutter? So I've now gone through, and hopefully you will now see, I've been able to show you how to cut them up. So the rotary cutter I use usually is the Millwood one. It's a really great product. It's got a fabulous little guard on it as well. And I think it's $8.99. Oh gosh, that's very clever. You've got it on the screen already, as if by magic. So there we go. I'm just trimming all these off. And almost there. Right. And check everything's clear, almost done. And then, oh, that one's completely free. So fabrics 1 and fabrics 3 are now completely free of any other fabrics. So I can put those to one side. And I'm just going to trim. I'm going to turn these because it's not really safe to be cutting that way, even though it's quicker. Always cut away from you. Doesn't matter how much time you save. Right, so almost, sorry. So the ruler I'm using here is the fabulous Creative Grids Collection 24-inch by 6.5-inch ruler there. So now I need to talk to you about half square triangles. You will see in my pattern under the notes section I'm telling you to cut I've given you the size that you should be cutting it at in the cutting guide, but not all of us are very comfortable with half square triangles. Even myself, I don't find myself feeling very comfortable with half square triangles. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting a larger half square triangle, a square, and then I'm trimming down. I just find that that's easier. It makes me feel confident knowing that I've got that little bit extra wiggle room. If my 1/4 inch isn't quite right, I feel a little bit more comfortable having that little extra bit of wiggle room in case I make a mistake. So I'm cutting my squares. I know it's the size is in your pattern. So if you want to cut something smaller, if you want to cut something bigger, that's fine. If you feel confident and you want to cut it to the size, you must do what works for you. But I'm cutting mine slightly larger so that way I have enough wiggle room in case I make a mistake. Because I've sewn with myself for long enough, I know I need that little bit of wiggle room, just in case. Right, so fabric 4, I need 2 squares. 2 squares, 4 squares and 8 squares. So I need 2 squares of that one. Right, so I'm going to cut these together. Right, so I need 2 squares of each of these. Just double checking. Yes. Triple check. Always make sure you triple check that everything's working fine. And again, I'm cutting mine a lot bigger than you need it to be, just in case. Now with the first one that I cut, so you can see now I'm cutting these at 5 1/4 because I want to be cautious. That is not the size you should be cutting them. If you're a confident sewer, you sew how you like, and this is where my rotary cutting mat comes in an absolute treat because you are not maneuvering your fabric around. Excuse my head being in your shot there. Right, so first thing I'm doing is I've now trimmed that edge, and now I've trimmed that edge. I'm going to rotate my cutting mat around, and I'm going to cut that into a 5 1/4 inch square. Now, once I've got them in squares, I'm now going to cut this across the long diagonal. And I'm going to make myself some triangles. Right, so I separate these colours as I go. Now this was the last one that I cut as well, so I know I cut along that line over here, but I know as well that this is larger than it needs to be. So I know that that line is completely straight. And the good thing is that because you're cutting this slightly larger, if you are out a little bit, it doesn't really matter because we're going to trim these up at the end. So you have got that little extra safety net of wiggle room to be able to make this very comfortably. Right, so we've now trimmed two sides, that one and that one. I'm now going to line up my fabulous Creative Grids 8.5-inch ruler here. And you can see I've lined up the 5 1/4 there, but I haven't lined up 5 1/4 there. That's why we always double, triple check. 5 1/4, 5 1/4. There we go. And that line is completely square already. And then I rotate that round, and I'm going to make my triangles. Right, and again, I'm going to put these in my colorway, and I'm putting them in the order that they need to be. So that's color 3. Colour 4, colour 4 I need 4, colour 3 I need 4, there we go. So colour 2 and colour 1. So I need 4 of colour 2. So if you are now confident doing this, fold your fabric on top. Because I need 4 of these squares, I am going to lay these on top of each other. And because this is a 12-inch mat, I should be able to cut these relatively easily. Now my first one I'm cutting at 5 1/2 wide, just so that I can trim that line up. And once I've done that, I'm going to slightly move that along so you can see I've just got a little bit of a gap. And then that one I know is a straight line, and I'm going to line that up at 5 1/4. And then I'm going to take that away, and I'm finished cutting that. So this is how much fabric you'll have left over as well. So you can see just on the fabric 2, that's how much you've got left over. So if you do make a mistake, and that's fabric 3 and that's fabric 4, so if you do make a mistake, don't worry, you've got enough fabric to keep you going there. So I know that my first one was cut at 5 1/4. I'm going to rotate this round, line it up at 5 1/4 as well, and trim up that line there. Great, and then over here, I'm going to make that 5 1/4. Now, because my ruler's not quite long enough to go over both of them, I'm going to line these up correctly. So what I've done is I've lined the bottom of my ruler up. I've lined the bottom of my ruler up there, and I've lined the bottom of my fabric up with the lines on there to make sure I've got this straight. And then I'm cutting it dead end there. So I know that that's completely straight because I've just cut that. These two lines are completely straight, so I've got a 5 1/4-inch square there very comfortably. So I'm going to line my 5 1/4 up here with the ruler. I'm lining the bottom up there and the top up there, just trying to make sure that I've got 4 5 1/4-inch squares, just nice and comfortably to make sure that they're right. And because I feel confident with cutting with multiple layers, I'm putting those on top of each other. You don't need to put these on top of each other. You can cut them out one at a time. There is no rush. No one's racing. It's to have fun and make sure you enjoy the process. That's all this is. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut across the long diagonal of my 4 triangles of fabric, my 4 squares of fabric number 2. And there are 4. And there are 4. So that's my fabric number 2. I needed 8 of those. And then last but certainly not least, I am now going to be doing, I need 8 squares of my fabric number 1. Now I am very confident with my cutting. If you don't feel confident cutting 4 in one time, please don't. You do not need to. There is no rush on this. Right. So we've had a question in, somebody has asked, what's the person's name? So it's from Hayley. Hello, Hayley. Wanted to ask, if you are a beginner, should you cut your squares larger and then trim them down? I'm not a beginner. I feel I'm quite a confident beginner, intermediary, but I cut mine bigger and I cut down. I always have and I always will, simply because I would far rather use a little bit more fabric by making sure that my triangle was accurate than have to unpick or redo. So I'd rather cut my square a bit bigger and trim down to make sure I get the most accurate half square triangle that I can possibly get. That's my tip on it. You can do it how works best for you. You have got the measurement on being able to do this without trimming down, but it does mean that if you do trim down, all of your blocks are exactly the same size, and it's just, I feel, a bit more of a comfortable process because I've got that little safety net by cutting something a little bit larger and then trimming it down. Right, so that's my first 4 squares in the fabric number 1, and I'm going to cut that across. So now I've got 8 triangles, but again, don't cut these multiple layers if you're not confident. Please don't. I don't want you hurting yourself or feeling uncomfortable or anxious in any way. There is no problem with cutting these out as one triangle at a time, one square at a time, and just making it work best for you. And then this is my last little trim, 5 1/4. And across the long diagonal. So that is my cutting all done for this block. Well, for now. When you've got your rotating cutting mat, do not move this. You're going to need it a lot. So now I'm going to lay out, you all know I love to lay out my designs before I start sewing them, simply because if you've made a mistake, now's the time to figure it out. And then I'm going to have that one there, oops, that one there, and that one there. So pink is not pink in this one, I keep remembering that. Because what we did when we were trying to design this pattern and we were writing the pattern, we wanted to be able to create a pattern that everybody could use, no matter what colorway they chose, because I think it would have been an absolute administrative nightmare trying to write these in every single colorway. So we wanted to find an easy way for everybody to be able to take part and have the same pattern and be able to take part with each pattern being the same. So that's why we've chosen a different colorway than what we've actually produced, because we don't have a colorway with that production. And we think it's working well. We've had some great feedback on it, and we have been very lucky because we've managed to get so many of you involved in this project, which I'm very, very excited about, because it's my very first block of the week with Sewing Street. And we even had a suggestion that even after lockdown, maybe we should carry it on. And I'm up for that. So now I have my fabric number 2. This is fabric 2. So that one goes there. And don't worry, even I have to take a moment and check back to my fabric key to make sure. I don't know why I'm checking this. I can just check the quilt behind me. I'm just thinking, I'm looking the colours up. They're there. I can just do that. There we go. And within 30 seconds, this should now make more sense to you. So that is our block before we've all sewn it all together. So we've now cut everything out perfectly, and we're now ready to do chain piecing. So how you do this is your call entirely. You are more than welcome to do it this way, which you will take 2 triangles, you put them on top of each other. Now, this is where your 1/4 inch and scant 1/4 inch comes in very, very important. You're going to be lining your fabric up just a few hairs in from where you would normally have your 1/4 inch, just to make sure that when it's a 1/4 inch, once you've folded the fabric, it is actually a 1/4 inch when it's finished. Over here you can see I am not even touching the fabric. I'm using the fabulous Elna 560 Elegance machine, Experience machine. And you can see I'm not even touching it. All I'm doing is I'm guiding the fabric through and letting it run. This has got a fabulous thread trimmer as well. And And then once you've sewn it, now I prefer to press my seams open. So you can see all I'm doing is I'm gently pressing my fingers down on that. I'm just going to plug my iron in to get this ready. I brought out the big guns today and brought the big iron. And again, this June Taylor cutting board is fabulous for this. So all I'm doing there is I'm pressing that down. I am not moving the fabric in any way. I'm not manipulating it, just pressing it down because everything is on the bias. Okay, so once I've pressed that down, I get my iron and I hold my iron down. You can tell I'm pressing, I'm not ironing. I still don't know how to iron, my lovely husband. That's it, that's all I know how to do. Oh goody, someone's used Bondaweb. Right, okay. Do we have the prim? So what I'm doing there, all I've done is I've now stitched on that line and I've sewn that together. So the next thing I'm going to do is when you've got this fabulous ruler here, you've got this wonderful 45-degree line down the middle. That line you are now going to line up to your seam. So you can see if you slide my seam across, you'll be able to see that I'm doing, I'm lining everything up there. And once I've got my 45-degree line on the seam, you are going to cut this to the size that's in the pattern. You'll be able to see in the pattern how we do that. Thank you very much. Ugh, trying to do that from a distance. Thank you, sir. Right. So you've got your triangle that we've now put together there. You're going to line this seam line there up against your fabric there. And what you're going to do is you're going to cut this so that you're taking fabric off all sides. You're not just doing it on two sides and then lining it up, because you can see there's a little bit of a wobble in the fabric all the way around. So you line that up perfectly. And this is where this rotating cutting mat comes in so perfectly with this. And then you rotate your cutting mat and the fabric hasn't moved, and then you line this up again to the size that it needs to be, and you're lining up not only your seam line there, but you're also lining up the sides that you need it to be on the sides. Line that up there. Now this is where you do want to try and be as accurate as possible. Excuse my head being in your way. Just want to make sure I get the right measurements on that and that you're getting it completely as square as you can be. Right, so we now have a correct size half square triangle. You've made one, now go and make 15 more. That's it, that's all you're doing. All the way through the quilt, you're going to make exactly the same thing. So I'll carry on doing this to show you, because that was just if you wanted to do the measurement on your own. If you wanted to chain piece it, what I'm going to do here is show you how you would chain piece, because I think chain piecing is the best way of doing this. It's quite weird sewing standing up. So now what I'm doing is I'm doing the brights colorway on this. We've got 3 different colorways that we're doing this in. We've got the blue colorway as well. That's the quilt that will be, I'll show you all the different quilts once they're finished. So if you're just joining us today for the first time and you haven't seen the Block of the Week program before, you will be able to go back and you've got every single block that we've made so far available on the website already. So you'll just need to search Block of the Week, and you'll be able to get all 5 blocks of today if you want to. If you haven't joined in yet and you'd like to, you'll be able to get all 5 blocks today, all on the website. So now I've done my chain piecing, and what chain piecing means is each time I just keep the they're not squares yet, the triangles going through the pieces, through the machine, and you just keep sewing them all the way along. And then once you've sewn them all along, again, you're not pressing, you're not stretching this, you're not stretching the bias in any way, because if you do anything there, you're going to end up distorting that center line, and you'll end up with a little bit of a wiggle in your triangle, in your half square triangle, which you don't want. So there you go. I'm just gently pressing those open. And although I turned the iron on the wall, I didn't turn it on in the little buttons on the side. So I've got a little bit of time now to just finger press these open. Now, many of you do press your seams to one side. I prefer pressing my seams open simply because I think it gives you a flatter block. You can press it to the left, you can press it to the right, you can press it to the dark, the light. It's your quilt. You do what's best for you. The only thing I would say to you is if you are doing a block of the week, it's your first time of doing it, or even if it's not, try something different. If you've never pressed your seams to the dark side, press it to the dark side for one of these blocks and see if you prefer it that way. It's just a different way of doing things. So here again, you can see my little light hasn't gone off, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. All I'm doing is I'm pressing down on the fabric. I'm not moving my iron around. Again, I'm just pressing down. I'm not moving around. That's why we call it pressing, not ironing, because you're literally just holding the fabric down to make sure that everything's nice and flat. And there we go. So I've now pressed down my seams on 3 of those. And now I'm going to trim these down again. And you can tell then when you're going through this, you can check that you've got these in the correct order. Nope, I haven't. That goes there, that goes there, and that goes there. I think it's really important when you're putting these together to make sure you're keeping your lines in order. And then I'm going to trim these up as I go. So again, just like I did with the fabric number 4 and fabric number 1 on the last time, I'm lining this line up with my central seam that I've sewn. I'm lining that up, and I'm then squaring up. So in your block, if you can see that you have got a wiggle in the middle, I would try and line up as much of that line as you can to be able to get the straightest line as you can along there. So if you do have a wiggle, don't worry, your block will still come out lovely. Just try and get it as straight as you can along the way there. So now once you've created your 2 sides there that are completely square, because you can tell you've just cut them, I then rotate my mat, and again I line that seam line up, and I line this up to the size that it's got to be. Excuse my head in your way again. I keep doing that, but I want to make sure I get it as accurate as possible, and I haven't got it the right size. You'll notice that if your seam line is not right, you will actually be able to tell if you haven't got your measurements right, because your seam line won't be on a seam anymore, which is where you'll realize you've done something silly and got it the wrong size. So there we go. You've now done your second block, your second triangle, and now we do our third. Whoops. And this does take a little bit longer, but you can tell you're going to have perfectly square blocks to sew together, and they'll all be the same size, so you should have the most accurate block possible to sew together to have your quilt be the correct size. And I've just realized I used my ruler in the wrong way there, but there we go, so that's fine. And then the last one for this row. So, and then the last little bit on this, you're lining your central seam up again. You're lining up the size you need the block to be, and then you trim your last 2 sides. Right, so now we've done 4 of these. I'm going to show you what the next step is. So we've now sewn 4 of those together. We've now trimmed 4 of these together. So when you're sewing these together, you're going to take these 2, and all you're going to do is you're going to flop them over. I always try and keep them this way and then fold them on top of each other, and I know I'm sewing on that line because the number of times I flopped them over, picked them up, gone to the machine and turned them round, and I've sewn them the wrong way. So then what I do is I do 2 stitches, I've got my needle down, and I fold it back to check that they're going the right way, and I double check back to the picture. It's really important because it's only 2 stitches to unpick at that point, whereas if you don't check, you go the whole way along, and then you're like, rats, I've done it wrong. Now again, here is where a scant 1/4 inch is going to make your life a lot easier to be able to make sure that everything lines up. So then again, exactly the same thing, picking those up in the order that they're going, flopping that on, and I know I'm sewing on this edge here. Line everything up nicely. You're doing your scant 1/4 inch again. I do 1 or 2 stitches, fold that back to check they're going in the same direction. They are. I'm happy with that. And there we go. Right. So now I know that that bit goes there, and that bit goes there. I'm now going to sew these 2 together. So I've just sewn that line there, and I'm going to sew that line there. So I'm sewing those 2 together. So you're going to make 4 of those in the order to make the block. Okay, and again, I'm pressing my seams open in this process. And if you've just seen, it hasn't taken me very long to cut this block out. I've sewn 1/4 of the block together, and how long are we in? 37 minutes in, and that's even with me blurbing as well. So it's not going to take a very long process. I'm going to do 1 more of these strips so that I can then show you how you're piecing these together row by row, because I think that's really important to show you where you're trying to get your points to meet and make sure you get as accurate a block as you can. So there we go, that's our first row there. Now I'm going to chain piece these because it's quicker. And again, this is where you can do them as chain piecing or you can do them individually. It's entirely up to you. Oh, now, this is now, we all have that moment where your machine eats your fabric. It happens. So I'm going to now create what I like to call a donkey for the end and the beginning. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but that's what I call it. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a leader fabric, and what happens is you've got a fabric on there, so these tiny little points, when they go through the machine, they're not going to get sucked down into the machine. You're going to put those little end bits on the edge of your leader, and that way then your fabric won't get pulled into your machine. There you go, so that's eaten it up nicely there. And the reason you have 2 of them is that when you sew on your quilt and when you sew off your quilt, you then have the leader at the beginning, which I've just put on. When I've chained all 4 of these together, I'll have an ender, if you like, and you leave the ender in your machine with your needle down, and it works then when you start again as your ender. And all I've done is the fabric that I've already had laying out over here, I've just pulled them out as they came along. And there we go. And I need a little pair of scissors, which I've got here. Right. So that's what your little leader is there, and then you've got your ender that's on there at the moment. So when you come back to use that, you'll then have that there. So now again, just like we've done before, I'm going to press these open. I'm just guiding my iron on top of it. I'm not moving the fabric, I'm just pressing down on it. You can see, there you go. Just guiding the fabric open with my finger and then pressing down with the iron. There we go. And then the last one. Brilliant. So now we square the blocks up again, but before I square them all up, I want to make sure I've got them all in the right place. So I now put these all back in the place that they're meant to be. And as I trim them down, I'm going to put them back in that place again. I'm going to move my mat over a little bit, just that I can trim over here. So picking that up, lining up my central line on my 45-degree line, trimming off that end and that end, and lining that up on the size it needs to be and on the central line. Oops. And then when I've cut it and trimmed it, I put it back in the area there. When I say the area, I mean where it goes in the block. Oh, I did my cardinal sin. I rotated it rather than the mat. We all do it. Right, so I've lined that all up. Again, I'm doing this quite quickly, obviously, because I'm doing it it's almost like a timed race to make sure I can show you all. You take your time, be careful, don't rush it. There is no race. You just got to enjoy it and have fun with it. And make sure you post pictures on our social media. We've got Sewing Street TV as our channel-run Facebook page. And we've got our Facebook fans page, which is great. And we've got Instagram as well, which is @SewingStreet. So there are many ways to stay in touch and share your makes that you're doing with us. And as we've been asked before, if I'm a beginner, do I need to do it this way? You can tell, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing half square triangles and how long you've been sewing for, the more square your block is and the more accurate your square is, the better this will be for you. And you can tell, I don't know how long everybody's been sewing, but those are identical in size. And you can tell that they're going to go together a lot better than if you just had a little bit of if your 1/4 inch is slightly out, your block wouldn't be square, and you would have potentially, I'm not saying I'm going to hit all my points anyway, but it's just an easier way of making sure that it actually is doing everything possible to make sure that your points are as accurate as they can be. I'm taking my leaders and my donkey off because I don't need a donkey at this point. So that's my first one. That's my second one. And all of the details on how you sew these together are in the pattern. So don't worry if you've missed it while I'm doing it. And I line this back up to check that I've got them sewn together correctly. And I do. And all your triangles are meant to go in the same direction as well. But just make sure, because even the first time I did this block, I had them all going in the same direction, but I had them upside down. So it was still a beautiful block, but it was just the wrong way around. And it is possible to do that. So make sure you lay everything out, check it back to the pattern, and you'll be able to see what I mean about getting it upside down. Because we don't want that. And then I'm going to press these open. Now I think that that's been relatively easy, hopefully not too headache inducing. You're going to sew your triangles together into squares, so you're creating half square triangles. You're then trimming your half square triangles to the size that's in the pattern, and then you're just sewing these into groups of 4. And then the groups of 4 are going to be sewn together into strips, and that is the whole pattern. And you follow the instructions as to which one you sew into which order. I've just done the demo slightly differently for the pattern just to make sure that I could teach it to you and show you the top things that are, because the way I suggest in the pattern to do it is that you sew all the colours together to make X number of things, but I've just done it slightly differently in the order here because I wanted to show you this and to make sure that we got this sorted. So at the point you are now going to sew these together, what is the important bit that you need to sew to make sure that you're getting it right? So we have got a point there and we have a point there. And we're going to want to make sure that that point there exactly meets that point there. No pressure for me on live telly at all. And that point there meets that point there. And that point there meets that point there. Now, first of all, you've got to just accept, if you hit the point, well done, you're amazing. If you don't hit the point, well done, you're still amazing. You've tried something, you didn't get the point, no one's going to be upset. It's just, I know we are so critical about our own work. Don't worry about it. If you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. Just go and have fun. So I'm now going to do the unthinkable thing. I am using 3 pins to make this work. So my top way of trying to get it right is, you can now see by pressing your seams open, so you're going to be sewing these 2 together. I'm going to start by folding them on top of each other, and I'm going to start with the one at the back, simply because it's easier. And I'm going to put my pin into the point where the white and the blue fabric meet. So you can see my pin there. And you can see that that's where they meet, okay? Then equally, I'm now going to put this pin on the next row underneath it where the white and the blue meet, okay? So that's where, why are you not going through? Come on, there we go. So that, in theory, is the perfect place on that side and on that side for your point to be, okay? Then I'm going to line up the next one, exactly the same thing. Where the yellow and the white meet, I'm pushing my pin through there, and you can see that that's worked perfectly there. And I'm going to do exactly the same on the one underneath. Push that through, and you can see, oh, I haven't done it right. And that's why you always check the front and the back, because you want it coming through on the actual seam, not above. So you can see there, it's come through exactly on the seam, not above it. Okay, and then thirdly, I'm going to do exactly the same thing over here with the pink. The pink will probably be easier to see because it's higher contrast than the yellow. And then I'm lining that up there so I know. So in theory, that is where your pins, if you're able to stitch through the pins, or where the pins are, that is going to be where your points are going to meet perfectly. So how do we put those points together? So first thing is I'm going to put that there, and I need when I hold it like that, I need my pin not only to be horizontal to the table, but I need the pin to be also horizontal to the line that we're sewing on. So it takes a little bit of maneuvering, but you get your pin in a straight line. So it's straight with the table and it's straight with the fabric. I then hold that there as tight as I can possibly hold it. So here I'm squeezing as tight as I can possibly do. And you can see now when I move my pin, my fabric's not moving. And then with the contortion of your fingers, I rotate the bottom piece of the fabric down so that when I push the pin through, it's coming through on the same place on both sides, and it is. Okay, so that's where that one's going to be. And again, exactly the same thing here. I'm holding this nice and firm on this side when the pin is horizontal and completely straight. I'm pushing that through. Oh, and I can see on this side it hasn't worked, but on that side it has. There we go. And on that side it's 6. And this takes a little bit of time and you get it right. There we go. Perfect. Happy with that? So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get your pin through in the same place on both sides so that you know you've got your fabric as close to straight as you can possibly get it, whilst holding that there. And it takes a bit of practice, and if you don't get it right, it doesn't matter, but that is how you do get it right. So when I'm sewing along, you can see that that is the point where I want, if I hit that point where the pin's going through, I'm going to nail that point. It's going to be perfect. I'm going to nail that point. It'll be perfect. And on this one, I'll nail it. Now, I've accepted I'm not going to hit them all because it's live telly, and what could possibly go wrong? As long as I don't set fire to the set, I think I'm doing well. So there we go. We're off. Do not sew over your pins, please. It's dangerous. I don't like it. So I line that up. Needle is down, and hopefully I'm going to get this. Oh, there we go. And there we go. Oh, I think I got that one. Hopefully I got that one, fingers crossed. Right. And now I'm going to press these before I look at them. And if you press your seams open, it's at this point you know that you've got it right or not. And we're just going to accept, if you didn't, it's still okay. You're still amazing. I'm saying that mainly for myself, not for you. Because, let's see how we go there. Now I do find pressing these longer seams open is a little bit harder. Oh. Might have done that one. It is a little bit harder, but it does, just taking that little bit of extra time, it just means that your block is a lot flatter when you send it to your, either you do it yourself or you send it to your long armour, and they will thank you for it. Oh, I don't want to get too excited because I'm going to reveal to all at the same time as me seeing it. So now this is probably where Joe's going to zoom in as far as he possibly can to see how out I am. Right, 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's not bad. Oh, I'm happy with that. Whoop, whoop, whoop. So you can see here, that was almost perfect. That one is spot on, and that one's pretty good as well. So I'm very happy with that. But please, I promise you, don't get upset if you've got it wrong. Now, if you have done it and you want to get it right, you don't need to unpick the whole block. So let's pick that middle block there, because that is literally one hair out, okay? What I'm going to do, you can see I'm literally one hair out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this back. I'm going to unpick. So I'm going an inch this way and an inch that way. That's all I'm unpicking. I'm not picking any more than that. So you can see I'm just doing every second thread, which was a top tip I learned from the wonderful Jenny Raymond. And there we go. Sorry, I have to get this closer to my eye so I can actually see it. Come on. So all I'm doing is I'm unpicking every second thread, and I'm going about an inch either way from it. Right, so you can see I've just created that little hole there. So all I'm doing now is I know that I nailed it on this side because that did go through there. And then I'm just going to put my pin in again and line that down. So why that missed is probably when I put it together, I didn't hold that as firmly as I needed to. Okay, so I've only unpicked an inch on either side here. So I'll just undo the thread as far as I've done it. Right, so all I'm going to do is this is where my thread ends and that's where my thread ends. I'm going to go about ½ an inch on that side. So you don't need to unpick your whole block. You're just unpicking that little bit in order to make sure that you can catch that middle seam. I've probably made it worse now, but there we go. Ah, there we go. So there you go. You can see I've now nailed that one as well. And that's how you do it, that you can unpick just an inch on either side, reposition that and go. And it's not going to cause a wobble on anything else. So I know that's only been half the demo, but you can see exactly what you're doing. I've shown you the top way of doing each and every one of them. It's a really nice block to do. Just going to move this all over here. I'm not the tidiest of sewers, sorry. So there we go. You're going to sew exactly the same way as I've done that for the top one there. So this is half of block 5 and that will fit into your quilt just there. Let me show you the other colorways that we've got as well. So we are going to be making, this is the, just going to slide that out the way. This is the block that we're making for today. This is block 5 in our Brights colorway. You're going to get the instructions somewhere. You're going to get the instructions in order how to do this, and you're going to get your fabric panel in order to how to do that as well. So that will be your the block that we're making today in the Brights colorway. If you're looking at the vintage colorway here, this is block 5 on what your vintage colorway is going to look like, and you'll get these fabulous instructions in order to be able to make that as well. And finally, you're going to do our blue colorway. You've got exactly the same thing here in the blue colorway, and you're going to be doing it with the same set of instructions, and you'll be able to do it from there. But if you're just joining us now for the first time today and you haven't bought any of our blocks before, sorry? If you haven't done any of our blocks before, let me show you what the previous blocks look like. So we're going to do number 4 first. I'm just going to move these out of the way. I am sorry I don't get this as tidily as I want to. And again, every Friday at 9 AM is me doing the demos on how to do the blocks of the week. So if you have missed anything or you've not joined in yet, where have you been? You can easily catch up on our YouTube channel, finding all the blocks that you haven't seen yet. And then these are the different patterns that you're getting. So we're going to start with block 4. This was from last week. And we're going to start with what colorway first? We're going to do the blue colorway. So this is the block that you're going to get for the blue colorway. And then we're going to do our vintage colorway, which is this one here. And with these, you're also getting your fabulous set of instructions to make each one of these, and a whole load of fabric left over at the end in order to use for other projects, or if you find later on you want to redo something, you've always got that thing. So you've also then got the Brights colorway, which is the quilt behind me here, and that is also, you've got your set of instructions to go with that for block 4. And then if you're going back as well, then we've got block 3 as well. So we've got our blue colorway here for the block 3. I never seem to get this in the right space, and it always seems to be a bit short there. So that's our block 3 for blue, and you're going to get the set of instructions that go with it as well. So you get these instructions for each one of these different colorways. The Brights colorway is here. And if you're wanting to see where this fits in on the quilt here, that's our middle block just there. Well, not middle, but it's the middle one on your screen there. That's our Brights colourway there. And then we've got our Vintage colourway over here. And again, with that one, you're going to get the wonderful pattern that goes with it as well, and enough of the panel to easily make that block. Then we've got block 2 as well. So you get the fabulous set of instructions and then the panel to make this block. And then we've got our Brights colourway as well. And the set of instructions you'll get with each one of them. And then we've got the Vintage colourway as well, which Vintage is turning out to be our most popular colourway with everybody, followed closely by our blue, and followed closely by that by our Brights. There's been a really good response to these. It's been great. And then our very first block in the whole series. So again, if you've missed any of these tutorials, they are all available on the YouTube channel, and you'll be able to get them from there. We'll start off with our blue colourway here as well. And you'll get the fabulous set of instructions that go with it with each one of these blocks. You've got the Brights colourway as well. And if I turn it like, if I turn it like that, and you'll be able to see it in the quilt behind me, just there. So there you go. So that's our Brights colourway. And lastly, our Vintage colourway there. And now those are the blocks 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Let me show you what the finished quilt actually looks like. I'm going to start by showing you the blue one, and I put something nice and heavy on it so it doesn't fall over. Now last week when I did this, I flicked it so hard it flew across the room, so I'm going to hang on to it a little tighter today. Oh, I need to just disconnect that iron, sorry. So this is our blue colourway, and you can just tell the blocks work so well in this. And in previous weeks, we have zoomed in on all the colours that we've got in the fabric ranges. I think that was in weeks 3 and 4. So do check back on our previous videos to be able to see exactly what the colours look like on it. But what I love about this quilt is I think it's worked very, very well with the layout that I've chosen. However, this quilt is completely non-directional. So you can tell that if you have it like that, or whether you have it like this, it's not going to matter because the quilt just flows all the different angles. It just works so perfectly from all different angles. So this is, that's our blue colourway there. Now, am I going to be able to put this on there without it falling off? Let's see. Stay. And then we've got our Brights colourway here as well. And I'm just going to show you the bottom of the screen there. You can see the other 3 blocks that you couldn't see from the top. It's a really lovely colourway as well. But our most popular star of the show, for the want of a better word, is our Vintage colourway. And there we go. Oh. And again, you can tell just how beautiful these colours are. You can tell why it's the most popular colourway that we've had. Really, really special. And again, the quilt blocks, the quilt works perfectly in every single direction. It's completely non-directional. You can put the blocks however you choose. There's no right or wrong. It's your quilt. And these are exclusive to Sewing Street, these fabrics, so it doesn't matter at what point you do want to join the process. We will always have the blocks, we will always have the colourways for you, and the patterns are available when you buy the panel. So it's a lovely way of being able to get involved in that sense of community. Again, please stay, thank you. Please join in on our Facebook page and our social media. We love seeing what you've done. If you've got any questions or queries or suggestions, please pop them on there as well, because I do read them every week just to make sure that I'm seeing exactly what's needed and where you are. And that is our fabulous block of the week. This is our 5th week that we've been doing it, 7 more to go, but then we've got our last, on our 8th week after that, we will be able to do our borders and sashings and things like that as well, which is great. That's the 13th show on our Block of the Week series. And we're going to be back in a few minutes. We've got a fabulous tools hour coming with, so we're just going to reset the set, and thank you so much for being with me.